So you do a podcast?
You're listening to the Brain Profits Podcast. Are you ready for the show? We are. So let's go. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Brain Profits. I'm Doug Mapp. How did it look? All right.
Stacey, is that coffee you're drinking?
Tea.
Oh, okay.
Tea. Yeah. No, I'm holding strong.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think that's actually a good thing to do. Just ask. All right. Anyways, I'm Doug Mapp, cognitive development professional. She's
Stacey Busby, and I get paid and enjoy the life of messing with the thinking of some of the smartest people I know. And
I'm Dr. Philippe, board certified neurologist, author of the book Neuroplasticity, Your Brain's Superpower, and online course creator of Take Charge of Your Brain.
All right. Now that everybody knows who we are and what we do, let's get started. So today we're talking about COVID and its effect on our brains, primarily the ones that most of us who did get COVID. I was one of those people that got COVID, by the way.
all of us did.
Yeah, all three of us got COVID, yeah.
We all have three experiences, yeah.
Yeah,
and I think, Philippe, you were probably the safest one of the bunch because you have other conditions, so you had to try to stay safer. And I think you caught it first, did you not?
I caught it first, and I'm this is not a competition, but I'm the only one that was hospitalized.
That is true.
Not joining that race.
Yeah. No. I certainly won that race. Hospitalized for 2 weeks.
Yeah, there was no one-upsmanships. So, and then I caught it next, and I think Stacey got it last. Right, Stacey? Yeah.
Yep. And I got it after being vaccinated. You were.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if
it was like at the very beginning of people, should we get vaccinated? Should we not? And so I caught it without having to even the opportunity to make a choice. But today we're going to talk about brain fog and the effect, what that is, and kind of the effect that it has, and why COVID kind of created that situation for us. And so with that, I'm going to let Philippe, you get started with. Talk about COVID, and specifically what it does neurologically to us. Naturally, I guess we'll be starting with, this is the enter the neuroverse person first.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's listen to Philippe as he takes us through the neuroverse and how COVID affected us.
Yeah, so brain fog is actually not something that's new. A lot of things cause brain fog. It's probably been a little bit more highlighted in the media because of its relationship with COVID. But brain fog occurs when people don't get enough sleep, right? So they wake up and they feel cognitively a little slower. So what do? They then take a stimulant like coffee to wake themselves up. It happens when we're not eating really healthy, or let's say we consume a lot of sugar and we get that high, and then all of a sudden we get real slow and feel cognitively lazy, right? It can happen with sleep deprivation. It can happen with stress. It can happen with certain medications and certainly drugs and alcohol. So brain fog is not something new at all. But what brain fog is that you just feel like you can't concentrate. It's often associated with memory issues. You've got a decreased level of alertness. Right? You're just kind of feeling like cognitively a little bit slower. Like you're having just some trouble thinking.
I feel like if you had like a little emoji of a brain and it had feet, it would be deep into like some mud or even manure. Like it's just like this slow, process of. I mean, it's noticeable.
Yeah. And like I said, a lot of different things can cause brain fog, but certainly COVID is one of those things. And it doesn't necessarily have to happen when somebody has COVID, although it can. But even sort of the after effects when the virus has sort of cleared the system, that can happen as well. And so there's a few different ways that COVID impacts the brain. So one of the things that COVID does is that it causes this massive inflammation throughout your body, and your brain is no exception to that, right? And so when that happens, the blood vessels in your brain get inflamed, and so that can reduce the amount of blood flow going to your brain, especially in certain areas. COVID can attack certain neurons, especially the olfactory neurons, which are the neurons responsible for your ability to smell, right? So a lot of people will say with COVID that they've got, they don't smell and taste food as well, or they lose their sense of taste. And that's because the virus can certainly attack those neurons. We don't see as much evidence of the virus attacking some of the deeper neurons in the brain, right? The olfactory neurons are sort of on the outside of the brain. But what we do see is that the virus can attack some of the helper cells that are there supporting the neurons, like astrocytes, which helps to keep neurons stable, helps some of the helper cells that help to take out the toxins that build up or dead cells that build up. So a few different ways that COVID can attack the brain itself, but COVID can attack the entire nervous system. So we see people develop things like inflammatory disorders of their spinal cord, like a transverse myelitis, or people develop neuropathies because their nerves are being inflamed, right? So the way COVID attacks the rest of the body, it also attacks your brain and the rest of your nervous system as well.
Is that true for, if you get the flu or colds or anything like that? Is that happening in your brain then as well?
Absolutely. Anything that impacts your body also impacts your brain, right? So your brain and body are connected. I don't have one of my wristbands on now, but I always have the one that says one brain, one body, right? Because people think that for some reason they're not connected.
That is so true. And I realize because I have been a fighter for that as well, having been in the mental health field, that the system wants to separate both. Like you just take your head off and deal with it over here. And even society, if it's something mental health wise or thoughts are messed up, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But if you have diabetes or these other things, okay, like let's potentially go to a doctor, or the system wants to do something about that. But I say all of that to say I've been a fighter for that for 20 plus years. And just then I was like, well, of course, like that organ is also being hit. And it was still new again for me, or at least I hadn't connected those neurons on that. That's a big deal. So then take it back to, you were talking about, there were so many things in there. If for anybody watching the YouTube, I was probably leaning in like, okay, tell me more, doctor, tell me more. But when you're talking about the red blood cells and inflammation and all of these pieces, I'm forgetting the exact words that you said, but so how do you, before you get sick, because whether it's COVID or colds or flu or whatever, at some point we're all going to be around people again. At least I pray and hope for that. And so how do you take care of yourself before that? Yep. And then the follow-up would be, what do you do during that then, so that the side effects don't last as long?
Yeah. So I think, it's really important to build up your reserves before you get sick, right? To get your body and your brain as strong as possible. And it's things that we talk about all the time. I was listening to one of our previous shows where we talk about the importance of physical exercise, right? Which is great, not just only for your body, but for your brain. It actually allows your brain to make more neurons. It allows blood vessels to be healthier. So that way you're getting as much blood flow to the brain as possible. It's about making sure you're getting enough sleep, because in the deeper stages of sleep, that's when toxins are being cleared out, right? It's about making sure you minimize stress, because chronic stress kills neurons. It's about eating really healthy, because nutritional deficiencies can cause brain fog, right? And what we eat certainly impacts our brain. And I think you mentioned diabetes a couple of minutes ago. Diabetes has a really negative impact on the brain, as well as high blood pressure. So if you have those chronic illnesses, it's about making sure those things are managed really, really well. And then when somebody does get COVID, and not everybody with COVID will have brain fog. So I had COVID. As far as I know, I haven't had brain fog. It spared it spared my brain, which as a neurologist is really, really important. Really, really good.
Well,
it's really good for everybody.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Not to cut you off too much on how's COVID spared your brain, but why is it, or do we even know why we even notice that we have brain fog?
Well, I think people just notice that they're having issues with their thinking, right? I think people notice that they're processing information a lot slower. I think people notice that they just are not remembering things as well. And I think that's really distressing for people.
Yeah, I think it's in more in that working memory area, and why your long-term memory is like, hey, we used to be able to do something in our working memory faster than we're doing it now, or or more complicated than we're able to do now. Something's off.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting that those two systems are, I'm going to use the word disconnected, but I don't really mean it. A little bit disconnected enough that you can notice that change or that that effect.
Yeah, and I think, right, your long-term memory, I mean, you're constantly using that, but there are periods of the day where you're not going to necessarily use that, right? Where the working memory is, you're constantly trying to use that, and I think when somebody does notice that they're having this brain fog, one of the things that you do need to do initially is rest up a little bit, allow your brain and body to start healing, right? I mean, if you had an issue with your wrist or your arm, we'd put it in a brace or kind of like a wrist strap or something to allow it to get some rest before we then start having you do some therapy to have it get stronger. We can't put your brain in a brace. Our version of putting your brain in a brace is putting you in a coma, which nobody wants to do if they don't have to do, right?
Please no.
Yeah. So, I think you need the rest, allow your brain to start to heal. And then that's when you start doing the work that you need to do to overcome these things. But brain fog can last a really long time.
Yeah. Did you experience it all, Doug? Do you remember?
Yeah, I did. I felt it in the way that, when you're trying to think about certain ideas or create new ideas, hold certain conversations. I was sometimes a loss for words that normally would have been there. Strategies that normally are, that I can come up with weren't there. It's just a really interesting thing to experience. And it was, but it helped me too, because it gave me a perspective that I didn't, I never had before. So I always talk about, I guess it's also a form of a traumatic brain injury, right? So like a TBI to a minor degree, where you can feel and notice like where you were before, so that that you need to get back, from a process or from a performance standpoint, right? And so, so that was really interesting to me to go through that process. What about you?
Yeah, and it's actually, that was the biggest thing. There were two things that happened that I at least thought I knew were neurological. And it was that piece of, and that's why I brought it up with Philippe, is that I feel like I'm just coming out of it. I had COVID in the very last week of August, and it's now the third week in October. And when I sit down to do cognitive work, that let's just be real, I don't love it anyway. Emails, formulating letters, different things like that. If I'm not just talking to people, that takes extra energy for me, which we probably know that from some of the work that I've done with Doug anyway, that some of those processing pieces. But I found that it was taking me so much longer that my brain would drift and come back. And I'm just starting to come out of that. And the other thing that happened was, I think I shared this with you and you didn't know what I was talking about, Doug, but I had this experience when I worked for 2 hours while I had COVID. I was sitting in my chair here, and for the rest of the day, I could feel where my muscles or where my body had been touching the chair. It felt like I had bleacher butt, is what I had said. Yeah, exactly. And it didn't go away until I took ibuprofen and laid down. And it was a painful experience. It wasn't like my muscles hurt. It felt like my nerves were on fire and tingling. And I think you talked about that a little bit, that is neurological.
Yeah, no, that's certainly neurological. Go ahead,
Explain
Doug.
For the folks, though, before you jump back in there, Philippe, what is bleacher butt for those who don't know what that is?
Yeah, I've never heard that term before.
You've never heard that either? Maybe it's a Midwestern thing. I don't know.
I'm about to Google that thing.
My sports days, like you're sitting on those old wooden benches from long ago, like back from when I was in sports and when family members were in sports. You sit there long enough, there's no way to get comfortable, and then it's like this, like you literally want to rub your butt for a minute when you stand up, like it's achy.
Yep.
I don't know.
See, my phonics from first grade allowed me to assess the context of what you were saying and come up with what it meant. But I had never heard that term. But you know why it is when something is achy or when something is painful, why your first tendency is to rub it?
Why?
It's because the sensation of touch travels faster through your nerves up to your brain than the sensation of pain. So it literally beats the pain sort of express train to your brain, and therefore that makes you feel better.
Well, that, like, I have all kinds of questions about that now, but let's go back to COVID, because we all know that I can squirrel in multiple different questions. So, golly. So then, okay, great. So then you rest, and then what? What is that?
And then I think one of the things that you need to do is do the cognitive exercises that Doug had me do while I was watching football the other day, which is not a good idea to do cognitive exercises while watching football and watching tennis.
We were using that assessment that we had you go through to see what you're like, kind of trying to stress your brain. So you added extra stress to your brain as you went. But no, that definitely does help. You know, I was looking to see if people in their recovery, if it was a automatic like fix, like their brain was automatically like fixing the some of the cognitive issues they were having. And there's a lot of studies that are popping up now that are saying that it's leaving lasting effects. Some more, you know, of course, more impactful than some others. But either way, it's not something that's just fixing itself, which is interesting. The brain, which is more, so I have a question about that. So why does it seem that the brain doesn't self-repair as much as it self-repairs like other organs or muscles or things like that?
Well, I think that the brain does self-repair. I mean, I've spent a lot of time talking about that the brain has this incredible ability to heal itself, but you also have to look.
I mean, like when you do nothing.
Well, you have to look at what are some of the other issues that the person has going on, right? So if somebody's got a brain that's been already ravaged by diabetes, high blood pressure, or some other inflammatory thing going on. So yeah, it's going to be much tougher for them to get back what they've lost, because their brain was previously injured before COVID, and now has been even more injured with the COVID, right? So they're already starting at a deficit. And it's amazing because a lot of times, you know, I'll scan somebody's brain and you see all of this damage, because the brain, like every other organ, has a tremendous amount of reserve. And then it'll be something like a small little infection, like a UTI, like a urinary tract infection, that tips them over. And all of a sudden they're cognitively impaired, or they're experiencing dementia symptoms. And it's because their brain had already been injured for so long. Now something else just tips them over. And I think you're going to see that with COVID, right? And so we've only been at this COVID thing for a little less than 2 years. And so we're not even quite sure what long-term effects necessarily means at this point, right? But certainly the cognitive exercises are important, but also the things that I talked about before, like exercising on a regular basis, getting good night's sleep, eating healthy, right? Challenging your brains in different ways, minimizing stress. All of that is significantly important.
Did you experience headaches when with your COVID symptoms, or did either of you?
On one day. Yeah, one day was super intense, but then that was it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had respiratory issues. It wrecked my kidneys and sent me into dialysis. I had other issues.
You didn't even feel headache. You're like,
maybe I had a headache, but
my brain was in good condition, but my whole body was falling apart. Yeah.
Right. So you know, it's really interesting. So one of the things that I did is, like, you know, I don't know if you, well, I know Philippe, you probably look it up. I don't know if Stacey, you've ever looked up, like, why do people get headaches in the first place? Like, what's like number one? The number one reason that people normally get headaches is from food sensitivities. And the number one trigger of that is that they say that the food and drinks release or tell your neurotransmitters to send certain signals that kind of disrupt like how you feel. And so that is disrupted by certain foods, like chewing, I guess, sugar-free bubblegum. It's like one of the biggest ones because of the aspartame that's in it. That's like a big deal. And then what was the other things? Caffeine, which you, Stacey, you talked about leaving the coffee world and going over to teas. That was like the second biggest trigger on why people get headaches.
Yeah, but caffeine is a little complicated too, because caffeine can actually help headaches.
Yes, right. But as a sensitivity thing, that's what they say is like number one. Followed up by, like, according to my notes, chocolate and alcohol.
Oh yeah, we talk about that all the time. Let me tell you, alcohol is so toxic to the entire body. Like there's certain things we have.
What about alcohol in like certain type of drinks, like wine or Kahlua?
No. You know why they tell you that wine is good for you? A glass of wine a day is good for you? Because it has this compound called resveratrol, which is a powerful antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. But it's not specific to wine. You find that in grapes, right? You find that in other fruits and vegetables, but it's really a way to sell wine. But most doctors will tell you wine is toxic to the entire body. There's no benefit to drinking wine, but God forbid you take away people's alcohol, they'll be in an uproar.
No.
Like
I wouldn't be in an uproar, but I think out of the three of us, I do enjoy a good glass of wine and every once in a while a beer and socialize with it. And yet when you're talking about it's that one little thing that might tip you over, I joke about it's my age, but when I talk about brain fog, headache, sluggishness, all of that, after I do have even just one or two glasses of wine, I've drastically reduced it in my life. I was never in my I'm going through the stages of my life. There have been stages in my life where medically I was not making great choices just in general because I was socially in that circle. But in probably the last 10, 15 years, it's been social and every once in a while. And boy, oh boy, it takes a couple of days to recover from it now.
Yeah, no, wine's a big trigger for brain fog, or not wine, but alcohol in general is a big trigger for brain fog. But alcohol, I'm sure, keeps a lot of us doctors and nurses in business.
Yeah, I bet it does.
I mean, it certainly keeps us neurologists in business. I mean, causes seizures. It's a risk factor for strokes with the abnormal heart rhythms that it causes neuropathy, causes dementia. Dude, I can make billions of dollars treating people who abuse alcohol. The only problem is they never have money because it all goes to alcohol.
Yes, well, that's fun. The next time I have a glass of wine, I'm going to be thinking about, it's like those, the warnings on the pack of cigarettes in England where it shows you all of the gross stuff that you're actually doing to your lungs. I'll be having a reel of that list that you just made when I have that wine, and we'll see what happens. We'll see if it works.
We'll sip it slower, then you'll be okay. Especially if you do it slow, very, very slow.
Yeah, it causes high blood pressure. It actually shrinks. It shrinks your brain. Initially, when you're drinking alcohol, so people don't realize when they get drunk or tipsy, it's because it's having a negative impact on your neurons, and it's dehydrating your neurons, right? It's causing dysfunction in your neurons. But it also long-term causes atrophy. It shrinks your brain, which leads to dementia.
Yeah. When I was in college, I started off as a biology major, and on my 21st birthday, I was a lab assistant. And a couple of days after my 21st birthday, I learned all of those things. Yeah. The lab tech was happy to tell me all of the damage that I just did.
That's right. I always tell this story. I'm out in Club Lounge one day, this is years ago, and this woman had a glass in her hand, a glass of alcohol, and she was dancing, maintaining a really good two-step. All of a sudden, she took a couple sips, and she became what we call ataxic. She could no longer maintain that two-step. She was real clumsy, and I thought to myself, the neuro nerd in me was like, "Oh, there goes her cerebellum," which is part of her brain, part of the brain.
I love to go people watch, and I love to be able to predict what is happening at a table next to me when I'm at dinner. I can only imagine the nerding out ways that you people watch.
I examine people from the moment I see them.
Ooh,
because that's what I'm trained to do, right?
We have known each other for a year. Then we might have to have a show on how you assess Doug and I. Do you have to be in person to get an accurate assessment, or can I use whatever assessment you've given?
I used to think so.
On Zoom?
Yeah, I used to think you had to do it in person, but with teleneurology now, and I've done a lot of teleneurology, you can do a lot through video. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up the COVID conversation to some degree. COVID, the potential that it had to wreck or cause issues with how you think is a very high chance that it did. Whether you noticed it or not. And there are things that you can do to help yourself. And of course, exercise being like probably number one on the list. But if you need some performance bumps and helps, companies like Think Up are there to help. Companies like Stacey Busby, Executive Coaching is there to help. And did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. And then so is the Inley Brain Fit Institute. We're all here to help. But anyways, hey, if you didn't have COVID, kudos to you. There's not something fun that you want to get.
I would not wish it on my worst enemy.
No, it did. It was painful. It was not something that you think, oh, I will be able to experience it and handle it fine. It's very weird. I did have respiratory issues as well. So,
and I guess I would just, on that same note, just to send out a little bit of our love and,
sure,
some kindness out to folks who have, that it has devastated many lives and families, both with death and job loss and financial destruction. So just sending out some love to everyone.
Yeah, but hopefully what it has done, or at least our conversation on it, what we'd like to do is to put a spotlight on the fact that we got to work on our cognitive function, on the way that we think, so that we can produce the outcomes that we'd like to see in our future, not just for us, but for the people around us, right? And so, as Stacey likes to say sometimes, that a rising tide raises all ships, right? I think I learned that from you.
Yep, that's my husband's quote. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so you stole it from him.
Well, it's not his quote. It's not his quote.
Yeah, you would take
what he says. Yeah, it's a famous quote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways,
we do need to rise together, though.
Either way, so by knowing that, you get to level up if you would like to level up. So today's a quick show, but that's good. We're going to keep them kind of short as we continue to go, so that you can use the best amount of time to actually take an action rather than just listening to us. But we'll have a lot more content as we continue to build this show. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to leave us a review. Even if you don't like it, let us know too, so we can make some adjustments. And let people know you're listening to The Brain Profit. If you have any specific questions, let us know in the comments section, and we will